Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
Welcome to another edition of Soft Cover, which is an e-launch portal of ThePrint. It's a new property that we've started because, of course, COVID-19 does not allow us to meet in person anymore. So we've shifted book launches to the internet, the online mode, like many other things in our life now. And the book we're reviewing today is called Every Creature Has a Story. I have with me its author, Janaki Lenin. I'm going to just open the book. The book is, of course, by Harper Collins. Here, Every Creature Has a Story by Janaki Lenin. Janaki, of course, you've been a filmmaker for a decade before you took to writing.
That's right.
You know, the book, because it was written so simplistically, so simply. It was written, it's as though you're actually telling the story of every animal to a child, and you're making animal behavior, which is seen as, something in the wild, something very far away from us. You're making it very relatable to human behavior. Tell us what went in your mind when you sort of wrote this book in this fashion, telling the story of each animal, each species in the way you did.
Okay, so like you, I've always liked animals, but I realized that there are a whole bunch of people out there who don't have that luxury of having a connection. And I basically decided they are my constituency, that I would want them to relate to animals the same way that I do, because it's such a wonderful world. I've received so much pleasure from watching animals and getting to know about them that I just thought people are missing out on that. So it's writing about science especially is like a constant endeavor to make it understandable, say it in a way that people can not only relate to, but also get sucked into, to the degree that they can see it the same way that I do, like they can share my obsession with it. So
Right.
that's in simple terms.
It's interesting that you call studying animal behavior, or sort of being able to relate with animal behavior, a luxury. A lot of people won't sort of think of this like that, because animals are a part of our life. We see them every day, even in our cities. We are seeing them. It's not that our lives are completely separate. But why do you say relating with animal behavior is a luxury?
I think you are probably one of the more observant urban people to notice these animals. Most people just do not notice them. So when I talk about animals, a lot of them are like, oh, it's something that you see in the forest far away. And I think most of them might relate to their pet dogs or cats. That's the degree to which they can relate. But if anything is wilder than that, it's then an alien thing. It's not something that they can comprehend in any way. So, and I think I call it a luxury because I went through half my life like that, not having animals to relate to, and then coming upon it and then just totally reveling in it. So, and I thought, it's a luxury that I didn't have when I was a child, and there are a lot of people who don't have that kind of exposure.
And what spurred this kind of obsession, as you call it, in you when it comes to animals?
It was totally by chance. It was meeting my husband, Ron Whitaker, who's into reptiles. So I started my life in the animal world, trying to understand why he likes reptiles, because they are not like mammals, right? They are much harder to relate to. They're almost like creatures from outer space. I mean, they don't, like snakes don't have legs, and they seem just so different in every way. So how do they see the world? What is it that they do in life? And why, I mean, the natural tendency is to be afraid of snakes. Snakes see humans. So
Yeah.
it started like that. And then I broadened my horizon to mammals and birds and everything else from there.
Yeah, I'll talk about this chapter that you've written on snakes, but I would like to read out for the readers, for the viewers, some of the names of the different chapters because they're extremely interesting, and they sort of capture the idiosyncrasies of animals that we're not never particularly aware of. So, speaking of snakes, the last chapter in the book is called "Devoted Snake Moms." Now, one wouldn't ordinarily think of snakes as mothers, but you have this entire chapter devoted on this. Then there's I remember there was something on laziness. Laziness has its uses, and the sex drive in fish, and there was there was another chapter called pregnant fathers, which I found very interesting. So talk a little bit about the devoted snake moms, if you could. How are snakes as mothers?
So all creatures have to have mothers, right? Otherwise, you don't procreate and create more of your kind. So there are mothers in every species, however small or large. This particular one, the mother southern African python, takes motherhood to such an extreme. She literally starves herself for a better part of a year. She guards her eggs from predators, and once the eggs hatch, then she is helping her hatchlings. They have to digest the yolk when they are born. They still have the egg yolk in their belly. So they digest that, and then they shed their skins because the skin is very tight on a reptile. They have to molt like insects do. So they shed their skin, and then they are ready to face the world. They're hungry. They want to go out and eat whatever it is they have to eat. And that for those several weeks, the mother is guarding her babies. And not only is she guarding them, she is basking in the sun and then comes back into the burrow and transfers the heat to the little hatchlings because they have a small body mass and they can't retain heat for very long. So all through the night, they are resting on her body coils, warming up. And when she finally leaves, like when all the hatchlings take off into the world and she is now free to go about continuing with her life, and she has to find a meal for the first time in several months, she is so thin that if she does not find a meal, she can die. It's
Right.
that, I mean, she cuts it so fine. And the researcher who chronicled this, Graham Alexander, said that one female didn't make it. She didn't get a meal because in southern Africa, their winter comes during our summer, and that's when the females are free of the labors of their motherhood. So they have to eat and put on weight for winter. So everything is like there's a lot riding on it. And they just, I mean, I can't think of any other creature that takes motherhood to such an extreme degree for the benefit of children.
Yeah. Motherhood, Janki, among human beings is such an exalted virtue, right? As human beings, we sort of talk about mothers with this kind of awe and reverence almost. But when it comes to animals, we more often than not don't accord the same kind of respect or dignity to motherhood. How do you make sense of how human beings often view animals?
I think that there is an entire range of emotions that people have depending on what their prior experiences. There are people who live close to animals who see the connection between human motherhood and animal motherhood. Even like if they have cows, for instance, they take great care of them. They give them special diets when the cow is pregnant. But to expect it to go further into the wild is asking people to make a big jump. And sometimes people do it, like with monkeys, for instance. They see them all the time, so they're able to relate to it. But snakes are a little bit harder to see. They are very secretive, they are cryptic. So it takes, a very obsessive researcher like Graham Alexander to go out and find out what happens with these python mothers. And we have to thank him for revealing what happens to them.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think a lot of distinction that we make among animals, categorizing some animals as mammals, categorizing the others as not, and also the way we then conceive those animals, as you said, snakes are cryptic for us and cows are sort of domestic. Do you think a lot of that is arbitrary?
To a degree, yeah, we do like to categorize things, even in normal everyday life. But science takes it to an extreme, like we have mammals and birds, and then within each we have separations like marsupials and placental mammals. It it's interesting. I mean, it serves a purpose in science, but I don't think we should be very rigid about these categories. I think when evolution happened, it just kind of happened in a very organic way. And I think we should also see it in that form. And I think I was making the point about why I even have a chapter on plants, because that we tend to think of plants as being so separate from animals and animals being so separate from humans. And I'm just making the point that it's not, it leaks into each other. Like plants behave like animals sometimes. Like there are carnivorous plants that eat insects, and in some cases, even small mammals. And so it's how do you then categorize? And they have communities. Like if you look at the whole underground system, trees support each other as a community. If someone is under attack from pests, they are without us knowing, they're boosting up this individual tree. So it's almost animal-like the way they behave. So I just would like to see it in a more as a whole rather than as compartments.
Right. You said that plants are also very animal-like, and one could argue animals are very human-like. So there is a sense of sameness across species then. What do you think human beings can learn from animal behavior? Do you think there are very, very similar patterns of behavior between human beings and animals? Because you talk about laziness, you talk about voting in African wild dogs, which I'd like you to speak a little bit more about, but you talk about these traits which are very, very human. So talk about the patterns that you see overlapping between human beings and animals.
Okay, so we share a common ancestor with other great apes. So it's not as if we suddenly came up with these grand ideas by ourselves as human beings. The germ of the idea, or the idea in some form, if rudimentary, exists in animals. So even if you take altruism, for instance, it's not a very human thing. I think it exists. Like even rodents have altruism and they have compassion. So I think for centuries we have gotten away with saying, oh, we are so special. Oh, we are so human. We setting ourselves above animals. And now the more we look at animals, the more animals are showing themselves capable of a lot of the same thing. So I think we're going to have more and more trouble distinguishing ourselves from animals as more animal behavior research comes out.
When people talk about animals in this fashion, when you're addressing animals on their own terms and sort of saying that, well, they do have emotions and they are capable, as you said, of quote unquote higher emotions, we often talk about positive emotions. We talk about empathy. We talk about altruism. Are animals also capable of deceit? Are they capable of betraying other animals? Are they capable of jealousy? Jealousy perhaps, yes, but are they capable of those kind of really base emotions that we also experience as human beings?
Probably, but you would have to know the intent of the animal, right? Before you figure out what is its intent, to understand whether it's deceiving or not. And I think some studies have been done with crows. For instance, they know, like a crow in its experimental setup. So it sees another crow seeing a hidden treat, and it also it then realizes where the treat is hidden, even though it can't see it. Or if it realizes it can see the treat but the other crow can't see it, then it will know that that crow, as long as that crow is around, it won't approach the treat and wait for that other crow to turn its back before it goes and gets it. So
Yeah.
you have to set up these kind of experiments to figure out what that individual knows beforehand and how it reacts to a situation. So
Yeah.
that's the only way you can. And they are, I mean, crows are, like I said, that was an experiment that was actually conducted. So this particular crow waited until the other one went
Yeah.
away before it could get it. Yeah.
Janki, this is something I'm extremely interested in knowing. When we talk about people who are interested, and we box them often as that, people interested in animal welfare, animal rights activists, it's just seen as another occupation. But in my own sort of emotional journey with animals, I feel that they do affect a person's politics as well. Studying animal behavior changes your politics as well. Have you had a similar experience?
I'm not, like, when I say we need to respect animals, I didn't mean it in that, granting personhood kind of level. I was just saying we just don't credit animals. We think they are idiots or fools and they don't understand
Yeah.
what is going on. Um, when you talk about animal welfare and animal rights, it's mostly focused on domestic animals.
Yeah.
And it's not something that I work with. So it's
Yeah.
well outside my
Yeah.
focus, my area of interest. So in my experience, I think the closest I've come to is with king cobras, for instance. Like, for many years, even now I have nightmares about king cobras because my husband works closely with them. And I had a close encounter with one, and there was a time when this king cobra, a captive king cobra, could have bitten me at any time it wanted. And for some 8 hours or 9 hours, I was barefoot in front of its nose. It was in a box, but the side hatch of the box was open and I didn't see it. So for 8, 9 hours, I was walking back and forth. And the fact that it didn't bite, because you always expect the worst of animals, right? So
Yeah.
if I'm going to be that close to a snake, it's got to bite me. We expect that to happen. So when this didn't happen, it really made me think about why didn't it do it? And I think that's when I realized that animals show a lot of self-restraint. Like, they don't want to bite you. Why would they bite you? I mean, it's not, even when they are threatened, they kind of hunker down low, expecting you would go away. They don't want to tangle with you. So I think that's what I meant by saying that we don't give them enough credit. Like, we think they are like automatons. Like, if this happens, they've got to react like that. If that happens, that they behave in set ways.
This whole idea of human beings being the only thinking species and the rest kind of just doing the biological job.
Not even biological. We just assume that they will be very predictable.
Right.
We don't think of them as thinking beings, as being able to react to us individually based on their personalities, on their past experiences. We don't seem to give them that much credit.
Yeah. Let me rephrase the question that I asked you about how this has influenced your politics. Because what I meant to ask is that when you study animals and on their own terms, each animal, each creature on its own terms, does it make you think about other kind of hierarchies among human beings differently? Do you see, for example, an overlap between the way human beings have treated women and the way we treat animals? Not giving them enough credit. Do you see an overlap in any way?
Well, there is that whole philosophy that about how we treat nature is, you kind of make it a metaphor for how we treat women. But then humans are humans. I don't know if you can correlate that in any way with animals, because we treat minorities differently. We treat women differently. We treat people of non-binary sexual orientation differently. We try to find something wrong with somebody to treat them as the other. We do that all the time. And I don't know if that is across the board, if it's a universal human failing.
Yeah.
And it often occurred to me, I used to have a dog which I thought was very ugly, but it's from my human perspective. But she had her group of friends, she had male suitors, she had babies. They didn't. So all I'm saying is, like, when we judge people for their looks, for the way they behave, for the community they come from, we are being very human in that sense, in the negative sense. Whereas I don't think in the animal world that kind of prejudice exists.
Yeah.
So I'm inverting your question the other way. I'm looking at it from the other direction, because it is, you could look at it as like we treat animals and women the same way, or you could go down that path. But I think humans are just humans in the way they do that.
Yeah. Your chapter, which I said I'll come to later, on voting in African wild dogs, it's just the title of this chapter is so surprising, right? Because this chapter talks about a political system among animals, in a sense. Talk a bit more about this. Are these autocratic? Are these democratic dogs? How does it work?
Okay, so this is a problem in social animals. When you live as a group, how does everyone decide what to do and when to do it? In humans, we can talk to each other and say, hey, is it time to go out hunting? Or, hey, shall we have a cup of tea? So it's easy to communicate and come up with a decision. But if you are a wild dog, which lives in a pack of, say, 5 to 12 animals, and some of them are well fed and feeling very lazy, the others are hungry and want to go hunting. So how do you then decide what to do? Does everyone then laze around? Because if you don't get everyone together, the hunt isn't going to be successful. And you can't leave some of the pack behind, because then they are vulnerable to other, their rivals or predators. So there is a strong incentive to do things as a pack. And the way they do it is vote. So they collectively take a vote. So one dog that wants to go hunting sneezes. It sounds like a sneeze. It's not really a sneeze. And then depending on how many responses it gets, the entire pack then moves or doesn't move. Yeah. So we don't really know the entire mechanics of how this works. So every pack has an alpha male and female who rule the roost, basically. They seem to have, like, each of their votes seems to account for many more votes than the plebeian dog. So if, let's say, you need 10 votes from everyone else, you might only need 2 or 3 votes from the alpha members to make a decision. So it's democratic, but it's autocratic at the same time. It seems to be like a sort of a hybrid.
Right. So what it's not is anarchic. There's definitely some system going on.
There has to be. If it's anarchic, then everyone goes their separate ways, and everyone pays the price for it.
Yeah. So Tell me, as someone who's engaged with wildlife for so many years, how do you think writing as a medium is different from filmmaking, which also you did for about 10 years or more?
Okay, very fundamental. I'm not a social animal, and filmmaking is very much a team endeavor. So I didn't do very well. So by the time as a producer, I finished negotiating a contract for the film as a whole, I was done. But that's when the film actually begins. That's when you hire the cameraman, the sound recordist, and the whole rest of the team, and you go to a location and you film, and then you spend many months doing it, and then many more weeks putting it all together. And you're constantly having to negotiate with other people, and I just didn't like doing that very much. And I'm I didn't realize it then, but I'm very much a loner, and I realized that only after. So when I decided to give up filmmaking, the only thing I knew was writing. And so when I started writing, I was just so happy to be by myself in front of my desk and not having to deal with other people. Okay, so I deal with editors, but it's not like a whole
Yeah.
team of 6, 7 people. So that's a fundamental difference for me as a person. But otherwise, writing, I I think I took a lot of lessons that I learned from filmmaking and I transposed it to writing, because I write the way I wrote to get a film um, commissioned. So I had to use words to describe what happens, what is the story. So the commissioning editor will say, okay, fine, go out and do this film for us. So I use the same language more or less to do the writing, except I'm not writing for commissioning editors, I'm writing for readers who are, in a way, the commissioning editor, really.
But also as a medium to talk about wildlife to an audience, how is filmmaking different from writing?
So with filmmaking, you have to spend hours in a hide watching animals. You may or may not get the behavior you're looking for, and there's a lot of pressure on it. Whereas with writing, I can just go with my personal experiences, talk with researchers, and I can write about it. There isn't that much money or pressure in bringing that behavior to an audience or a readership. So the degrees of stresses to both are so completely different. So I think a lot of the behaviors I write about in the book haven't been filmed, for instance. So if I were to make a film with these stories, I'd probably be spending the next 50 years of my life doing it.
Right.
So,
I'll go to your first chapter, which is called Good Singers Make the Best Dads. And this chapter, in such an absolutely dripping way, you've explained how nightingales go about sort of impressing, how male nightingales go about impressing female nightingales, how they sort of mate after that. Explain a little bit more about that and their whole sort of it's a system of choosing your partners in a way, right? And singing is integral to that. Now, do women have absolute autonomy to pick whoever they want? How does it work?
so in nightingales, typically in birds, the males are the colorful, flashy, flamboyant creatures, and females are very drab. In many ways, people will use that. I see that often in social media. Oh, the female birds are just drab little things, and it's the males who are so good looking. There is a reason for that, because it's the females doing the choice. Like, the male better be good looking, otherwise she's not going to find them attractive. So it's the entire thing seems to be around what the ladies want. In Nightingales, the birds aren't very much to look at. So what the male nightingale has going for him is song. And he has this fantastic repertoire of some 400 or more songs. And it's a combination of different kinds of pitches, and each pitch is meant to do something. It's the low frequencies are for telling rivals off. The mid frequencies are to show himself. I'm just giving you an example. I don't really remember the exact details of the song. So the mid frequencies are for showing off his good health and stamina and vigor. And the higher frequencies are to, the flirtatious calls for the female. So they have their songs do these three different things. And they call at night because the scientists think that's when the air is clear and the song carries farther. And the females are going from one male to the other, literally auditioning them. And they don't spend, like if they had to listen to all 200 songs, they'll be sitting there all night listening to each male. So they just give them like a few minutes to show them what they're capable of. So the males do a combination of sounds. The scientists don't yet know what that trick is, like what exactly the females are looking for. And if they like the male, they become a pair and make a nest and rear their babies. And if she doesn't like him, she gets the next male. And the males...
And do they remain...
Sorry?
I was asking, do they remain monogamous?
For that season, perhaps. So there are two different things here. So they can be socially monogamous, like they might be monogamous for that period of time in this particular case. And in the next season, they might go and mate with somebody else. So it's a very fluid thing. And so the males, because they're singing so much, they lose weight. So it actually tells on their body condition. And so they have to be really, in good form to make a good father. So the more experienced males are the ones who have this vast repertoire, are in good condition. The 1-year-old males, the males in their first season of breeding, don't have such a vast repertoire, and the females don't even give them time of day. They just go on to the next guy. So this is how the song becomes a proxy, a signal for how good a male is. As like say a peacock's tail would be for a peahen. So it's a symbol for what the male is capable of.
Right. And are these songs, how do they pick up these songs? Are they taught to the nightingale by the older nightingales? How are they taught the songs? How do they build that repertoire of
by listening to other male nightingales? Yeah.
Also, Janaki, I was interested to know that how does someone like you, who, again, I'm using this phrase again and again, who studies animals each animal on its own terms, how do you sometimes view the conversation that we have, say, in the media about human-animal conflict? If an elephant is sort of this entire, for example, this story, this news about an elephant being fed with crackers, how that became a communal sort of issue, and doesn't make you get really frustrated and wonder why is nobody talking about that elephant and what she went through, that pregnant elephant?
Okay, so I don't study animals, just to clarify. I'm only a writer. I write about people who study animals, the researchers. So in conflict, the one thing I spent a lot of many years researching this for various articles that I had written. And the one thing I realized is that we are creating the conflict. Like it's really not so much people versus wildlife, it's people versus people. It is urban people not understanding that rural people, like one day they might have a confrontation, but for the 393 other days, they might be getting along, giving each other space and going about their lives. And we do not even acknowledge that. And we are very quick to judge people as being barbaric and cruel. We don't try to see what happened, why it happened. And I would see that whole case of that mouth bomb and the elephant dying as a failure of our policies. You cannot denotify forests for railway lines, for mines, and you know, for factories and stuff like that, and not expect the elephants to react in some way. And the people paying the price for all these denotification and taking away of elephant forest are the rural people trying to earn a living in the same area. So elephants are huge. They need 250 kilograms of forage a day. So if you're going to take away a forest, where are these elephants going to go? What are they going to eat? So they go to the nearest. I'm just saying in really, really broad terms. The details are very specific depending on the location. So now, yesterday, I was reading this news about the Hastio forest being cut down for coal mines in Jharkhand. It's an elephant forest. Where are those elephants going to go? To some poor farmer somewhere who is trying to grow crops for his family. And if he loses that crop, he's going to be in dire debt. The whole agricultural economy runs on borrowing money at very high rates of interest in the hope that the farmers will raise a crop that they are able to sell, pay back the debt, and survive. And if that is going to get destroyed, what you're making people even more desperate than they are. You're making animals even more desperate than they already are, and you're pitting them against each other. You're literally, bringing out the worst in animals and people. So you're going to have to look at the entire wildlife policy we have. We now have a draft EIA, which is going to do more of this. So it's very hard to pick a particular case and make it communal and say, those guys are the villains for doing this horrible thing to this poor elephant. Look at the people. They've been suffering all this time. What has anyone done to help them?
So do you think this kind of, when we talk about man-animal conflict, this kind of hostility between man and animal that we often in the mainstream media speak of, do you think that's a function of faulty policies?
Generally speaking, I think the mainstream media sensationalizes conflict. Like I said, they're just pitting two desperate individuals of two different species against each other. And instead of seeing that, you polarize it. You're making people out to be the villains of the piece, which, when a little bit of understanding could calm things down. But I guess it doesn't play well in terms of TRP or whatever the media is looking for. So, but at the same time, how much of mainstream media is devoted to analyzing the draft EIA or talking about what is happening in the Hastio forest or the Dibang Valley Dam? So you have these real serious problems facing our wild habitats, and we really need to focus on them a lot more than these individual cases where it looks barbaric. You're just not doing anyone any favors. You're accelerating or escalating the conflict. So the more people feel, okay, so the other thing I have to say is very often wildlife is just a soft target. So when you are a marginalized person and you have no access to the forest official or the chief minister or the forest secretary, and they're not going to listen to your problems, what are you going to do? You're already at the end of your limits. So you see this as the government animal, right? Very often people call elephants, oh, it belongs to the government. So you take it out on the government's animal. So I think I go back to what I said before. We've really created this monster, and it's going to take more understanding from everyone else, urban people questioning what is being done in the name of development, media looking into the real issues, why this is happening, and then asking questions of politicians, why is this happening? And then we might have a solution.
Yeah. You said that often elephants, for example, are looked as the government animal, and not in the case of elephants, but surely in case of other animals who are seen as making trouble, they're just simply declared as vermin by the state, by the government. So on one hand, the animal is seen as this representative of the government, which is creating trouble in people's lives. And what the government does to respond is just declare the animal as vermin. So, do you think who's the individual who's losing out the most is the animal at the end of it?
Oh, yeah, there's no doubt about it. The animal loses no matter how you look at it.
I also wanted to, one of my last questions to you is I wanted to ask you, do you think this entire movement for personhood of animals, does that have any merit? And if yes, why? If not, why?
Oh, okay. I haven't thought about personhood in animals long enough to know what the pitfalls or the advantages of something like that would be, whether it would benefit anything. I think the problem is when you talk about animals, like there are glamorous animals that we would bleed for, like tigers, for instance.
Yeah.
We do not care as much about tiger forests. All tiger forests in central India are like little postage stamps. I mean, how long are they going to sustain tigers? We are not doing enough for the habitat. And I keep going back to that again and again. You can grant personhood, you can do whatever you like. But if we do not care for the habitat, then those animals, personhood or no, are not going to be able to survive. So I think that is fundamentally the problem. We just do not seem to care for our forests enough.
Janaki, my last question to you, your obsession with animals, as you put it, has that led you to become a vegetarian, give up eating meat? Because that's something that a lot of people go through.
I used to eat meat and I don't anymore, not because of any great ideological value. I'm allergic to it. I just cannot have animal protein.
Not for because you've said that we don't give enough credit to animals, so not for respecting the agency of every animal to not be eaten by human beings, nothing of that sort.
But animals eat each other, and humans are animals. So in the larger scheme of things, I'm not against people eating meat. There are entire communities of pastoralists in India who are contributing to the food security of this nation. So if you look at the way nomadic pastoralists in the Dangas or the Raika with camels survive, they're basically taking their animals to fallow land where the crop has been harvested, and the animals are eating what is waste, and they're producing protein from it that people can survive on. If you expect everyone to live off vegetable matter, you're going to need much more land to feed everybody. And where is that land going to come from? So I'm not really sure that this a wholesale vegetarianism is going to save the world. And you also have to think of these communities that survive off their animals.
Surely, but for a lot of us, especially for those of us living in urban areas, the reason we are eating meat is not for survival, right? And to draw this parallel, sometimes I wonder, to draw this parallel between human beings eating meat versus animals eating meat themselves. I, as a meat eater, won't be going out and getting my prey, right? I wouldn't be killing the animal myself, as opposed to the animal who would be doing that. So do you think that's a bit of a false equivalence when we sort of, especially in the urban areas, the more privileged ones, for just taste, are consuming animals in the fashion we do?
I think what you're asking about is industrial farming of animals.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a horrible way, no matter how you look at it, whether it's for eggs or meat. This whole, factory farming of animals has just got to stop. It's really bad for animals and people. So I don't have any ambiguity about that. But I think just as a general principle, I think it's okay for people to eat meat. I live with there's a community called the Irula. They live around here. They are hunter gatherers. They go into rice fields and they catch rats and eat. That's their fundamental source of protein, and they're saving crops. So there are all these models of
survival,
using the land that are traditional, that has worked for all these years, and we just need to be sustainable. I think although it has been overused, the word sustainable, I think there is something to it that we need to look at.
Right. Janaki Lenin, thank you so much for speaking to us at The Print. I would urge all the viewers to pick up this book, read this book, and thank you so much for talking to us, Janaki, and giving us this perspective on animals that more often than not we don't have the luxury, or we're just ignorant to have. Thank you so much for speaking to us.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you, Print.